And we're walking from a space of busyness and ordinary consciousness, ordinary life, into the rarefied space of the annulment of existence. Good afternoon, everybody. We're back at we're back at it here. It's Friday afternoon, and the Slonimer has a Netivot Shalom has this beautiful teaching about Moses in today's Parsha in Behalotcha. It says that Moses, and literally, it says Vaish Moshe Anav Mikol Ha'adam, that Moses was the most humble amongst all people. So it says in the context, in the parsha, the context of this phrase is to contrast the complaint of uh, Miriam and Aaron, his brother and sister, who feel as if Moses is lording it over them, is considers himself better or of higher rank than they are, and they make a comment about that, and the Torah says, well, most humble person amongst all people. So it's a very interesting comment, and I think it's also comes to point to the main characteristic of Moses as an archetype. He is the archetype of humility, which is in contrast to him also being the greatest leader of the Jewish people. What does it take to be a true great leader? It takes true humility, and that's one of the lessons that we take from Moses. The Slonimer takes this a little deeper and teaches us something about the spiritual journey that each one of us, the Moses within each one of us, or the Moses that each one of us is capable of stepping into. And it goes into a realm of the spiritual journey that is quite esoteric to many of us, even to myself. I want to admit that as I'm going to share the teaching in the words of the Slonimer himself, there's a piece of me that's grappling with the concept of humility, particularly in the way that the Slonimer here talks about in the Hasidic philosophy. Kabbalah and Hasidut talk about the concept of annulling the self, going to the place where one completely immerses into eternity, into the divine, such that one's person is annulled, is disappeared, is no longer there as a spiritual goal. So I want to explore that together today in the words of the Slonimer. And let's jump right in. ויש לומר הביאור בזה על דרך משל לחבית מלאה מים. And we can say that the explanation of this, of humility, right, of Moses's the spiritual humbleness that Moses represents and models for us can be explained with the following analogy of a barrel full of water. שכל עוד היא ישו מציאות כשלעצמה, ערכה גדול מאוד. As long as this barrel is an item, an existence in and of itself, its value is very great. אבל אם ישפכו את מי החבית לים הגדול, הרי הם חיים באפס ולא יחשבו כלל. But if one spills the water out of the barrel into the ocean, he says the great ocean, and the idea here is the infinite ocean, right? הרי הם חיים באפס. Then the water in the bottle becomes as if null and void and has no intrinsic value at all. It's a beautiful metaphor, and you can see how by recontextualizing, taking a different perspective on what it means to be an item, to be in existence means to have value. All of this obviously is a metaphor for the human being, for the self, and we will see how he elaborates on that here in a moment. ואפילו 1,000 חביות לא תוכר מציאותם בהיותן בתוך הים. Even if you spill 1,000 barrels of water into the ocean, its existence is still, the existence of those barrels, of that quantity of water, becomes null and void in the ocean. בעת היות המים נפרדים, מהווים הם מציאות וישות עצמית. When the water is separate, i.e., in the barrels, they become separate entities and have an existence in themselves. אך כאשר דבוקים הם למים שאין להם סוף, הרי כל מציאותם בטלה עין ואפס. But when they cleave, when they immerse inside infinite water, their individual existence becomes again null and void. וכמה הרבה מים שיהיו בחבית, זה מה ערך להם לעומת הים הגדול. And as much water as one can fill inside the barrel, it has no intrinsic value, no value in as it relates to the great ocean or the infinite ocean. וכל שכן וקל וחומר באין ארוך כאשר יהודי דבוק בהשם יתברך. And so much more so, many times multiplied, when a Jew, when a spiritual person cleaves him or herself to the Holy One, blessed be, to the great infinity, blessed be. Then a person is annulled completely and occupies no space in relation to to divine existence. You see. So wow, I just want to sit with that for a moment. Invite us to let that consideration of my and your person becoming null, becoming as if not existing, in the context, in the consideration of the divine infinity. What comes up for you when you consider that? For me, there's a little bit fear, a little tremble, a little sense of a pending loss, the loss of my selfhood, the selfhood that I cling on to so dearly, that I defend. Dignity is all about defending an intactness of self, defending the the right to exist and the right to be considered as an entity, as a me, as a person who carries a name, who carries a story, who carries a history, who carries contribution to others, who is valued by others, a person who loves, a person who cares, who has desires, who has dreams, a person who, in interaction with other persons, has a need to be considered at least as equal, maybe not greater. Often we actually aspire to be greater, to be the best we can. When we're competing, we're aspiring to be greater than others, but at least not to be lesser than others. So there's a whole system within me, within my psyche, that's called my person. But then shining the light of eternity on the me that I consider myself and I protect so dearly, and considering the possibility of annulling that, short of dying physically, sort of annulling material existence, biological existence in the world, but psychically, the consideration of annulling the self. Often we talk about it as letting go of the ego. I don't like the word ego so much, but that, it's good enough language to describe the process of bitul hayesh that Chassidut and Kabbalah talk about as a spiritual ideal. And the first step towards that spiritual attainment is being humble. That is the paradigm, that is the archetype that Moses represents for us. Imagine dissolving oneself, one identity, into just part of a greater flow and letting that be okay. So this discussion is apropos on a Friday afternoon as we're about to enter Shabbat. And the Slonim is going to talk a little bit more about that. If you're watching this on Friday afternoon, as we're preparing here for Shabbat, consider this part of your preparation a good intention to take with you. It's certainly an intention that I hope to take with me into Shabbat and to keep cultivating during the 24 hours retreat, spiritual retreat, that's available to us starting in just a few hours. So let me continue with the Slonim. ועל פי המבואר שדרגתו המיוחדת של משה רבנו הוא עניין ביטול היש וההתבטלות כעין ואפס לפניו יתברך שמו. And as we have just learned that the special rung, special level of Moses, our teacher, is the ability to annul existence יש להבין הקשר המיוחד בין משה לשבת. We can also understand the special connection between Moses and Shabbat. וכמו שמתחילים בתפילת שחרית בשבת, and as we begin the special prayers for Shabbat, ישמח משה במתנת חלקו, כי עבד נאמן קראת לו. This is in the Amidah prayer. May Moses be gladdened with the gift of his portion, as you have called him, you, meaning God, your faithful servant. So what does that mean? והעניין בזה שהשבת קודש עניינה התבטלות בחינת עין. This means that the essence of the Holy Sabbath is also the annulling of everything to the level of void, ayin. So imagine, we walk into the sanctuary in time. We step across the threshold from daylight on Friday to dark on Friday evening as the Sabbath descends. And we're walking from a space of busyness and ordinary consciousness, ordinary life, into the rarefied space of the annulment of existence. Buddhists, for instance, would call that the shaking up or the annulment of illusion. Or we go to the other side of this veil, where we give our daily existence, our daily lives and concerns so much significance, into a space, a perspective, where in the scope of eternity, what does it really mean? And we get to celebrate, we get to recalibrate ourselves to experiencing what it's like to live as if nothing meant really anything. וכמרומז במאמר הקדוש, ששת ימים תעבוד, ועשית כל מלאכתך, ויום השביעי שבת לאדוני אלוהיך. As it says in the Torah, 6 days you shall labor and do all of your work, and the 7th day shall be a day dedicated to being. Yud Hey Vav Hey could be translated as being. Imagine being capital B, capital E, capital I, capital N, capital G. Elokecha, the divine, your God. ששת ימים תעבוד ועשית כל מלאכתך, מרומז לכל ענייני מצוות מעשיות. The 6 days of work and doing all your labor hints here to all the mitzvot, the action imperatives in the Torah that are proactive, that are involve some kind of doing. אבל מצוות שבת אין בה שום עשייה וכל עבודה, היא רק לאדוני אלוקיך. But the mitzvah, the action imperative, action, quote unquote, imperative of Shabbat, of the Sabbath, has no work or labor that is related to it, because it is all dedicated to being, Yud Hey Vav Hey, capital letters, your God. So you see here that there's a definition implied in there of what it means, what your God means. It means that you and I, we make our God. And how do we make our God? Do we make American Idol, for instance, our God? Do we make our work our God? Do we make money our God? Do we make ideologies our God? Do we make a person, a charismatic leader, our God? Do we make statues or works of art or um, ideas our God? Do we make our children our God? Do we make our toys or leisure time our God? Is our car, right, our Ferrari our God? Do we make our lover our God? Or do we make being our God? Let's let that sink in for a moment. Capital B, capital E, capital I, capital N, capital G, Yud, Hey, Vav, Hey. What is it like when we make that our God? Infinite, our God. Then, he continues, לבטל עצמו לגמרי לאדוני אלוקיך. Because on the Sabbath, this liminal space we step into, there is no proactive or active, there is no doing. We turn from a human doing, we transform, the potential is to transition into a human being. Ukeita Bazohar Kadosh, and as it's brought in the Holy Zohar, the great Bible of Jewish mysticism, commentary on the Torah, that is the bedrock, the foundation of all Jewish mystical teaching, Kabbalah, the Holy Zohar. Shabbat iu yom nishmata. Shabbat is the day of the soul. She'en bashum tfisa chomrit, because there is no material anchors on Shabbat. Our life, our spiritual life, our psychic life is anchored in material in ordinary consciousness, during ordinary days, the ordinary days of the week. But on the Sabbath, that is not needed because there is no need, there is no anchor in the material. It's fully so. וכמאמר Chazal, and as the sages say in the Chilta Yitro, in the Midrash, שבשבת צריך להיות כאילו כל מלאכתך עשויה. On the Sabbath, one should conduct oneself as if all of the labor that is necessary for sustaining life is all done, is all complete. וכמה דאמור עוד, and as it is further said, עוד אתה קידשת את יום השביעי לשמך תכלית מעשה שמיים וארץ. You have sanctified the seventh day to your name, you meaning being God, תכלית מעשה שמיים וארץ, the purpose, the essence of the creation of heaven and earth. בריאת שמיים וארץ הייתה יש מאין. The creation of heaven and earth was a creation from something made out of nothing. ותכליתה להחזירם לבחינת עין. And the Sabbath, its purpose is to return existence to its original state of void, of nothingness. ולכך השבת היא תכלית מעשה שמיים וארץ. And that is why the Sabbath is actually the purpose of creation, of the creation of heaven and earth. שהיא בחינת עין והתבטלות, because it is the space of null and void. A beautiful concept. So all of creation is really made for the purpose of extinguishing itself, annulling itself, so it can go back to its original state. And in fact, if you follow modern theoretical physics, quantum theory, what we find is at the subparticle level of existence, in fact, you have matter and antimatter is always exchanging. There are particles that jump into antimatter and disappear, and then particles that come back from antimatter and become matter again. And you see that dynamic right in there. And his analysis shows that in the story of creation, it's hinted, the mystical take on creation is that everything that exists as matter was originally, before the Big Bang, as it were, was antimatter, was null and void, was nothing. And that nothing became turned into something. And the purpose of turning that into something is that so it eventually would turn back to its original state. And that original state is the spiritual draw. It's sort of like the beacon of light that as spiritual workers and spiritual seekers and practitioners, we are drawn towards that light. The first step towards that spiritual attainment, and obviously perhaps the metaphor of the quantum level of particles jumping in and out across the threshold from antimatter to matter back and forth is not a good metaphor for the spiritual journey. Because in the journey there are levels. We don't jump from here into infinity and back, but we work gradually. We expand our capacity. We have the opportunity to consciously annul, reduce, soften the edges of the self, the edges of the ego. To put in perspective, that which during the week seems so critical, so worth fighting for, sometimes so misguided. Is it really that important to go after the toys and the conveniences and the comforts and the fame and the supposed accomplishments? It is important while we're at it. It's good to be competent at that level when we are attending to that level. But in the bigger picture, what really matters? What really matters is that place of being. And Moses models the first step as a step into humility, into becoming humble. And with that, I'd like to wish us all a Shabbat Shalom at whichever level, myself included, annulling my personality into void, completely cleaving into God, as the Chassid, the great rabbis teach us. That's aspirational. But do I have the sense of the deliciousness of where that may lead? I do. And that's the blessing and gift I'd like to offer to myself and to you on this Friday afternoon. Shabbat Shalom, I'm Rabbi Reuben Modik with Makom Halev Community. Makom Halev is Hebrew for heart space. Here in Nyack, New York, please keep in touch. Write your comment below. If you're in the neighborhood, give us a shout out or come and visit. Also, Hebrew Learning Circles, our phenomenal spiritually oriented, humanly oriented educational program. Find out more about it on the website, HebrewLearningCircles.org. Like us, subscribe to our YouTube channel. It'd be great to have you in the Cyber Yeshiva. And for now, Shabbat Shalom.